Good day and welcome to our webinar on virtual uncertainty, navigating the new leadership challenge. Some quick house cleaning before we begin as we go through the presentation. If you have any questions, enter them into the chat on the right. If there are any issues, please email us at events@execonline.com. Now, before getting started, I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time out to listen to this webinar. We know all of you are dealing with both personal and business challenges associated with the current disruption, whether it's dealing with child care for your kids, as I am, or scrambling to ensure customers are served and employees are taken care of. And we appreciate the fact that you chose to be with us today to learn about this important topic. I also wanted to express our appreciation to you and all of the leaders of your organizations. As an online leadership development organization, every single day, we hear stories about how leaders are making a difference in the lives of citizens globally, whether by ramping up production of vaccines, ensuring supply chains hold, food getting stocked on store shelves, employees being comforted and cared for, and financing is put in place to ensure business continuity. There are many inspiring stories of leadership emerging from the disruption, and leadership will get us through. And as time goes by, we will be sharing more of those stories with you. Now, with that as a starting point, let me do some quick introductions to the folks you see on the screen. First, my name is Adam Briniger, coming to you live from my home office, where I am sure many of you are as well. I lead our client solutions team at ExecOnline and am responsible for deepening and expanding our relationship with our incredible clients. We also have Chris Moore on the line, our Vice President of Product Management, who is taking the lead on our virtual uncertainty products. I was going to ask you to wave. Thank you for the wave, Chris. And we have the star of the show, Dorie Clark, an acclaimed strategy consultant, professional speaker, and award-winning author. And I might add, a speaker with one of the best virtual executive presences that I've ever seen, which I imagine is a rising skill set in our new world. So first, a quick word about ExecOnline and who we are for those who may not be familiar. So
we'll be back.
They will be back. So ExecOnline is your partner to drive transformative leadership development strategy for the digital age. We do that by providing online leadership development solutions and services you need to drive organizational impact. Our online leadership development solutions are created in partnership with the world's best business schools and experts like Dorie, and can be deployed rapidly and in multiple use cases and learning journeys. These amazing programs are paired with strategic and turnkey client service, including market-leading business case and ROI data, so you can demonstrate the effectiveness of virtual learning, insights like we are presenting today, an advisory for your CHRO and team, and a client success team to provide an effortless experience, as we know many of you have limited resources to run development programs. So quickly, who do we work with? We work with more than 400 organizations who are at the very forefront of the digital transformation of leadership development. Our experiences with these organizations have informed many of the insights we will provide you today. Now let me turn to the agenda. Our time together will start with a discussion of what we believe is the defining management challenge of the moment as organizations seek business continuity. It's what we call virtual uncertainty. I'll quickly provide a framework for thinking about virtual uncertainty and why this is so important, and why you must have a response to it. I will then turn it over to Dorie Clark to lead the bulk of the session, who will walk you through some concrete action steps and ideas from confronting this unprecedented challenge. Dorie will then turn the baton to Chris, who will quickly lead us through some of the ways in which ExecOnline will be supporting you with thought leadership, products, and learning journeys related to virtual uncertainty. Finally, we will conclude with a question and answer session, where Dorie and the ExecOnline team will answer all of your burning questions about this unprecedented disruption and how to better manage through virtual uncertainty. So let's get started. One thing is certain, coronavirus is accelerating the shift to virtual work. Many of you are right now, as we are sitting here, are experiencing this shift. For some of our listeners, this might be your first week working remotely. For our Asia and some of our European organizations and listeners, we are well into the shift taking place. And it is an experiment truly unlike anything we've seen in the history of work. Although virtual work has been rising in recent years, the scale of virtual work we are talking about today is truly unprecedented. Positions we never expected to go remote are suddenly remote. Activities we once considered to be essential to be conducted in person, such as sales trainings, conferences, leadership meetings, and trainings must now be conducted virtually. Individuals who may never have wanted to work remotely are now being forced to do so and learn if they like it. We're going to learn a lot from this experiment over the next period of time. And as we've talked to our clients, it is clear the coronavirus crisis is accelerating a trend that has been in place, for many, many years. And as Jennifer Christie at Twitter says in the quote that you see on the right-hand part of the page, we are very unlikely to go back to where we were after the disruption has passed. Now, this rapid shift to virtual work, however, is just one of two distinct management challenges for leaders that COVID-19 is accelerating. The other is managing through uncertainty. Managing through uncertainty has been a priority for leadership development in the 21st century. But COVID-19 has obviously amplified that uncertainty to unprecedented heights as organizations grapple with a host of unknowns related to the virus and its impact on the business. Now, we believe the combination of these distinct management issues, leading virtual teams and managing through uncertainty, what we call, again, virtual uncertainty, is the key business continuity challenge as organizations seek to ensure employees are both productive and engaged and serving customers at this difficult time. But this is not easy. Many leaders are unfamiliar with managing virtually, and many, 80%, believe it's actually harder. And all of us know that it's hard to be a manager in the analog world, being empathetic, having difficult conversations, motivating, giving performance reviews, heck, sometimes even just talking to employees, much less in the virtual world, where a lot of us are not nearly as comfortable. We also know that leading through ambiguity is challenging for all leaders, no more so than when things are moving extremely quickly, when information is often difficult to collect, when a lot of things are happening all at the same time. And doing them together, leading virtual teams, managing through uncertainty, is even tougher. So with that, let me introduce Dorie Clark, who, with many thanks, is going to provide a lot of concrete advice and insights to help us manage virtual uncertainty. You see Dorie again, so she's back on the page, or back in the room. So Dorie Clark is a management expert. She's a strategy consultant, with clients at some of the best organizations in the world. She's an executive educator, and works with Duke University faculty and the Fuqua School of Business. She's as well an award-winning author, and has some, really tremendous books around, personal branding, standing out, a really great repertoire of content that Dorie has created over time. And she has also been named one of the top 50 business thinkers in the world by Thinkers 50. So welcome, Dorie, and appreciate all of the great insights that you're going to be sharing with the group.
I appreciate it, Adam. Thank you very much. And hi, everybody. I'm so glad that you're taking the time to join us today. Obviously, we are in a mode where a lot of things are changing incredibly fast. I mean, we thought that we knew what fast was. I mean, 30 years ago, we thought we knew what fast was because, oh my goodness, there's 24-hour cable television. Isn't that crazy? And then 20 years ago, we thought we knew what fast actually was because you have the internet, and now there's instant communication and email and things like that. I think right now, and who knows, things might even change further, but I think we're really coming to understand what fast looks like when we are scrolling every 5 minutes on our phones and see that things that we took for granted our entire lives, things like, oh, restaurants will be open, or, oh, schools will be open, suddenly are changing, and we're having to adapt to that in real time. So I think that one of the things that we're dealing with, I love the slide title here. Disruption's exactly that, disruptive. Disruption is something that, over the past 20 years, certainly in Silicon Valley, but beyond, has acquired a kind of positive sheen, right? We want to be disruptors, and that is powerful. I mean, if we think of it in the Clayton Christensen sense, Yeah, we want to be moving forward. We want to be shaking up industries. We want to be creating something new and powerful. But of course, there's also the old meaning of disruption, which is that it is something that is unexpected and sometimes kind of bad that we have to deal with. I mean, there's really no sugarcoating it in the present moment. In many ways, things kind of suck, and so we have to find a way. I mean, the whole point, the whole premise of leadership is that we have to find ways for our people to turn this into something good. Right at the moment, I mean, the circumstances are what they are, but leadership entails us being willing and able to separate our reactions from what the situation is, and looking for the positive and looking for ways that we can acknowledge what the reality is in the moment, but continue to move forward and point people in a way so that they don't feel hopeless, they don't feel paralyzed, but instead feel, hopefully, through this process, a greater sense of cohesion or togetherness, and to understand that, yes, this will end. I mean, unquestionably, right, with a viral epidemic, it is going to conclude at some point. We are going to get through this, but the interim is going to be hard, and we have to keep people focused on the future, and that means we have to do that for ourselves as well. And it's not necessarily easy. Literally just before this call, 10 o'clock this morning, I was talking to a friend on the phone, and this is a very successful professional, and she started crying on the phone. She just said, and I said, well, what is there a particular thing? And she said, look, it's just nobody knows what's happening. And even for very, very talented, high level, high performing people, that sense of uncertainty of, the VUCA environment, right? We've all perhaps heard that term from Warren Bennis, that we're in a situation that is volatile, that is uncertain, that is complex, that is ambiguous. That is life right now. That is pretty much the definition of life right now. So we have to get good at this somehow, and we have to find a way to inculcate those skills in our people so that they can be resilient, and that there can be the kind of trickle down effect of positivity, because we haven't trained for this. These have been the fat years, right, in the past decade. Some of us, many of us, perhaps remember the 2008 crisis. Many of us perhaps remember post 9/11, when there was so much fear and uncertainty then. But for a lot of the people that you might be managing, or that your people are managing, these especially for younger employees, this is the first time that they've ever seen anything like this. And frankly, in terms of the scale and the scope, this is the first time any of us have seen something to this extent. So it really is new. No one has the skills in their toolbox yet. People are having to learn it on the fly. And so I think this is part of why I think that this course is so powerful and so important, is that what we are really trying to do is equip people with skills in real time that no one has trained for, but which are extraordinarily valuable. Because in a moment of extreme uncertainty, the old saying, right? You never get a second chance to make a first impression. It's not so useful if your people acquire the skills that they need to manage uncertainty 90 days from now, right? We need the skills now. And so that's what we're trying to do. If we think about rapid pivoting, rapid ideation and iteration, ExecOnline came to me literally 2 weeks ago with the idea for this course, and we made this happen. This has been literally all I have done over the past 2 weeks, is create this course, and it's something that I'm pretty excited about, because we need something in real time that is responding to today's contemporary environment. So let's dive into it a little bit. And I think, oh, good, you're going to move the slides for me. Look at that. That's amazing. So one of the things that we need to think about in terms of taking a long view about how do we understand this, how do we make sense of it, is understanding that even if, of course, if it is hard in the moment, and it is, we are gonna extract some lessons from it, but we have to be deliberate about it, right? So often we tend to get heads down in things, and that's never more true than when we're feeling under siege or when there's a crisis, right? We just do, we just execute. But where some of the most powerful lessons come from, the ones that make us better leaders in the moment, is actually forcing ourselves, and we do have to force ourselves to take a step back and to analyze a little bit, to make sense of what we're seeing. And so one of the things that I think is important for all of us, for you and the people that are under your purview, is to really periodically ask, what are we learning from this? This is the ultimate stress test, right? Where are we strong? Where are we weak? Where are systems breaking down? And how can we address that for the future? We are also, all of us, going to be forced to make decisions in real time, very rapidly, with imperfect information, right? That's the kicker. It's hard. We want to be thoughtful, we want to be deliberate, we want to not make mistakes, and yet in this environment, especially, I mean, the whole idea, I live in New York City. I'm coming to you from the financial district in New York right now, and there's a big discussion about quarantine. Should there be a stay-at-home order? Well, this is kind of a perfect example of people having to make a decision with imperfect information, and you're balancing competing priorities. There's public health, there's the economy, there's, okay, if you have a stay-at-home order, does it impact health? How do healthcare workers get around and do what they need to do? There's so many variables. You do not have the luxury of being able to wrap your arms around perfect information. Sometimes you just have to go. You just have to do it. And so that is what it is, but there's a powerful upshot from it that you can take, which is that if you consciously review your decisions, literally write down your rationale. People don't do this, and then retrospectively they kind of forget or it gets foggy. But if we literally write down our decisions and what the thought process is, here's the pros, here's the cons, here's why I am making this call, and you look at it 3 months later, 6 months later, 12 months later, this is extraordinarily powerful because it enables us to actually get better at decision making. We sometimes think that we'll get better at decision making just by making more decisions. It's not like that. If many of you have probably read, Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, and he talks about, the 10,000 hours and all that. But the key, the most important aspect of Anders Ericsson's research that he's drawing from is it's not 10,000 hours just kind of messing around. Like 10,000 hours of playing, pick up basketball or something is not going to make you an NBA star. It is concerted, focused practice. And so it's not making the decision, it is reviewing the decision and understanding where your biases are. It's understanding what are the errors in your thinking and where did you go right, so that you can learn from that and replicate it moving forward. And another interesting question for all of us to ask ourselves is, where did you actually do better in a crisis? Where did you do better in moments of uncertainty? Because I think sometimes it's very easy with all this mishigas going on around us to just say, oh, well, it's all negative. It's, all these things, these constraints are forced upon us. But the interesting thing, actually, you look for positive deviance, right? Are there places where actually you do better, your team does better in these moments? And what does that imply? What does that say? And how can you harness that as a best practice in the future? Because things will return to normal. It doesn't feel like it now, but things will. And so the question is, how do we retain the best of this crisis and make it part of our standard operating procedure moving forward to make us stronger, right? Frankly, it's like a virus, right? If you endure something, if you are successful, you gain immunity to that thing and you get stronger because of it. That thing is not going to attack you again because you've learned how to cope with it. And we need our organizations to be like that. We need our organizations to develop immunity around it as well. So those are a few things to think about when it comes to learning from this moment, from crisis, from uncertainty. But let's talk now about monitoring the signals, because one of the real challenges, I mean, the people around you, I'm sure, your employees, all the folks around you, are coming to you because they want certainty, right? And this is a high pressure situation for a leader, because this is something we talk about a lot in the course. There's a real temptation as a leader to want to reassure people, to want to say it'll all be okay, right? You want to be able to say that. The truth is, we don't know. We don't know how this is going to shake out. We don't know how long this is going to take. It would be nice to be able to provide people with answers, but we don't actually really have answers. And so I think it's important to separate out a couple of things, right? You can reassure people, you can help them without making false promises, right? It's very, very important to make sure that you're stating what you know to be true, but you don't get out over your skis, because that is something that can really destroy trust long term if that turns out not to be true. So ultimately, one way that you can reassure people in a very truthful and forthright manner is by yourself gaining access to accurate information and then sharing and disseminating that with other people. People are looking for certainty, and if you have accurate information, that is, it may not, solve the problem, but it at least shares a little bit more so that people feel like, okay, I can at least trust, I can at least relax my hypervigilance, because I know that my leader is sharing with me what he knows or what she knows, and I can have confidence in that. So there's a few different ways that we can be ourselves monitoring the signals, monitoring the information. So one thing, of course, that's important as a starting point is just understanding for yourself what the official communication methods are in your company. And ideally, we want companies to have very clear channels for all these things. But the truth is, in a lot of situations, even big companies, even companies you would think kind of have this figured out, the chain of communication transmission can be a little bit dodgy sometimes, because they may not have war gamed out these particular scenarios. So sometimes you may have to be really proactive yourself in hunting things down and saying, well, who knows about this? Who's in charge of this? What are the methods officially that we're supposed to be getting information? And if you're not on the list, how do you get yourself on the list so that you can access that? That's number one. But it's also very important for you to be cultivating your own sources of information, because one of the ways you can really distinguish yourself is by being a calm, rational oasis in the midst of all this. So it's useful to be thinking about things like, well, what questions should I be following? In all the noise out there, how do I find the signal? Well, what questions should I be looking into and exploring? And so one, for instance, is, well, how is this situation similar to or different from past ones? What does that look like? I mean, one of the ones, for instance, that I was very interested in is, okay, well, we know like SARS was really, I mean, everyone was all scared about SARS, and then it was like not a thing. And so why is this different? I was very curious about that. I've been researching it. Interestingly, what I learned, just FYI, is that apparently SARS was really most transmissible when people were already very sick, and so it was easier to quarantine people because it was obvious they were sick. Part of what makes coronavirus sneaky is that a lot of the transmission can occur before people know that they're sick. So that's an interesting distinction. But so the question is, what is similar or different from past situations, and what are the implications of that? Also, it's useful to cultivate your own sources. This could literally be something as simple as, following experts on Twitter or something like that, or maybe you have your own sources. Maybe you have someone in your family who's a doctor, or, and we're talking specifically right now about the coronavirus situation, but this applies to anything. This applies to economics. This applies to trends in your industry, right? It's always good when it comes to times of uncertainty, and there's a lot of things that can create uncertainty, not just the present moment. Have your own sources. So you want to think about, well, how do I cultivate sources that are experts? How do I cultivate sources on the ground? I mean, like one example, for instance, right, is you want to see how many cars are being produced. Well, it's useful sometimes to, if you have a friend or something that lives in the town where the factory is, you have them drive by and say, well, how many cars are in the parking lot of the factory, right? What does that say about production levels? So think about your own information sources. And of course, it's important for you to form your own opinion about that, your own reasoned fact-based judgment. And then, crucially, to contribute to the conversation, because again, one of the things that sets all of us apart, they always say, crisis is an opportunity, right? And we all know that intellectually, but of course in the moment it sure as heck does not feel like one. It feels just like this wave crashing over us, and we're just trying to breathe or try not to get knocked over. But it can be an opportunity, and part of the reason it can be an opportunity is if you use it properly, you can distinguish yourself by the information you've gathered and by the quality, the incisiveness of the thoughts that you're sharing. So for those of you who may be familiar with Ronald Burt, he's a sociologist at the University of Chicago. And he talks about network theory, which is basically the study of how do you make yourself indispensable in a network. And the very short version of this is that the people who are most indispensable in their networks are the people who are very well connected among lots of different groups. Because what the kind of default is, the human default in organizational life, is that people get very siloed. They are not communicating with each other properly. But the people who do, the people who buck that trend and talk to lots of different people, become the most indispensable, because they are both learning information that is valuable, and then they are transmitting it back. It is not about information hoarding, it's about information transmission. If you know useful things and you share it with lots of people, people begin to say, oh my God, I didn't know he knew those people, or whoa, how did she know about that? And they discover that you are uniquely valuable because you have access to information and ideas that other people don't. And they start to say, wow, we really needed that. That was really helpful. So it's a way that you can set yourself apart. So let's move on now to the question about how do you as a leader, and by you I mean literally you, but also your people that are under your charge, how do they stay agile and keep questioning our assumptions? Because one of the big challenges, right, is that in any time of uncertainty, again, it's a human thing, right? We want to have a life raft to cling to, and unfortunately, it is very common that people sometimes take a hypothesis, they sometimes take an interpretation of reality, and they treat that as their life raft. They take a hypothesis or a theory and they treat it as a fact. Oh, this is the way things are, or this is how things are going to be. Well, guess what? When you're in a time of very, very rapid, volatile change, it might be how things are today, it might not be how things are tomorrow, and we have to get comfortable with that. We have to essentially shift our mindset into being scientists. And specifically what I mean by that is that we have to treat almost anything as a hypothesis and say, well, I think things are going to be like this, but we'll see. We'll see how the facts emerge, and then we may alter our hypothesis based on what we are learning. And so what we want to be asking ourselves in order to cultivate that mentality in ourselves and in our teams is a few things. Number one, have the facts change? And if so, what are the implications of this? Now, this is especially useful in a crisis. It's especially useful in times of uncertainty, but this applies across the board, right? I mean, again, we were talking about how learning these skills can make you a better leader pretty much no matter what, in any condition. And this is an example of it. So I'll give you one, sort of well-known one that we can think about. The fact that smartphones emerged, 2007, the iPhone was created, and so we got these phones. Everybody's got one. We've got GPS in our phones. All of a sudden, that makes possible something that was never possible before, which is the concept of Uber, the concept of Lyft. We couldn't have done that before, but the technology changed and it made a new thing possible. So the facts on the ground changed and it opened up a new opportunity. So that is an important line for us to be questioning. Another one is to really think about, well, what alternatives might occur? The more expertise we have, oftentimes, unfortunately, we get kind of a mental lock-in where we say, oh, well, I know these situations. What happens after A is B. And, 99 times out of 100, yes, that's true. This is a helpful heuristic in normal times. But in abnormal times, which frankly this is one of them, it's not so helpful because we assume this thing is going to happen. We make all our plans based on that happening, and whoa, after A, it's not B, it's F. And we're like, WTF, what's that about? And so what we have to do in order to practice being nimble is to ask ourselves the question deliberately. We have to force ourselves to ask this, is, okay, well, it's probable that B is going to happen, but what else might happen? What else could happen? We have to train ourselves to do that. That is a really important step. And then finally, a key with this is preserving optionality. I am really big on this now. And optionality, of course, just really means how do we maximize the number of options that are available to us. If we commit too early, if we lock in with something, it becomes very hard to get out of it. And in times where things are moving very fast, it is useful to us. It is a real benefit to be able to pivot as easily and as smoothly as possible. So there's different ways you can preserve optionality. Sometimes it means spending a little bit more money, and sometimes, frankly, that's worth it. I mean, I'll give you a personal example. I used to always, as pretty much as a matter of course, if there was a discount to prepay for a hotel room, for instance, I would do it. I'd say, oh, sure. Well, I mean, I know I'm going. Like, I'm not going to change that. So yeah, I'll do that. Now I am not doing that, because what I have come to realize is my plans might be certain, the universe might not be certain. And so I'm willing to pay an extra 20 bucks if it gives me the option to cancel with no penalty up to 24 hours in advance. That is a useful benefit. But in all areas of our lives, in all areas of our business, we can say, what can we do to preserve more optionality? Let's go ahead and move to our next question, which is about team cohesion. And I want to make sure, by the way, friends at ExecOnline, that I'm keeping to the right timing. So if you can type into the chat box for me how much, like what time count I need to stop by, that would be really helpful, just so everybody's on the same page. That would be great. But anyway, let's talk about building team cohesion during challenging times, because this is something that comes up a lot, right? Especially if you have team members, folks that you're in charge of, or those people are in charge of their own teams. All of a sudden, they may not be used to at all working from a virtual environment. And of course, there's technical challenges. This one doesn't have a headset, and this one, their internet isn't fast enough, and they don't know how to do it. Blah blah blah. I mean, that's one set of challenges. But something that's a sort of deeper or more philosophical challenge is the question of, how do you actually keep your team together, right? Because when you are in a crisis situation, when you are in a period of uncertainty, uh, any time, right? We know this instinctively, that there's really two directions you can go. A crisis can either bring people closer together, or it can tear them apart. And we want to make sure that that we're ideally using this as a positive thing. This is, it's clearly not positive what is happening, but can we turn it into something positive? Can we make it a way that we can bring people together? And so I think a few things, and this is something we talk about a lot in the course, is we want to reinforce what is unchanging. It feels like a lot of things are changing, right? Feels like the ground is slipping beneath our feet. But if we can harken back to key principles, if we can harken back to the mission, why is our company here? What are we trying to accomplish? How do we help and serve our customers? That can become a bit of a North Star that can guide people through these difficult times. It's also important, correspondingly, to talk about how your team specifically fits into that mission, right? So reminding people how your team is able to help the overall mission of the company. And also, this is a place where it's really useful to emphasize team values. There are things that your team specifically that matter to your team. And it could be something like integrity, or we always come from behind. It could be a can-do attitude. But whatever it is that your team specifically has cultivated as part of its culture, that is really powerful to remind people of, to harken back, to tell them stories about times you've done it in the past, to remind them, even in these dark hours, that they can do it again. So let's move to the next topic. These are all things we cover at length in the course, and they're things that I know from talking to friends, from talking to colleagues over the past week or two, are on a lot of people's minds. Big one is managing your team's anxiety. I mean, people are stressed out. They're, for obvious reasons. Their savings are not in a great place, thanks to the stock market. they see, the disruption of so many businesses being shuttered. They worry about friends and family. They worry about the virus itself. There is a lot going on, and it's not just this present moment, of course. Anxiety, uncertainty, uh, this is kind of par for the course, unfortunately, these days, because things move very rapidly. So some key things that we want to be doing here as leaders. Number one, it's important to meet your team where they're at, right? I mean, there might be a temptation in some ways to just say, no, don't worry about it. Let's move on. Chin up, cheerio. you know, this is not so helpful when someone is really in an upset or distressed state. You've got to meet them where they are emotionally. It doesn't mean going down the rabbit hole with them. You don't want to make it worse, but you say, yeah, this is incredibly challenging. I feel stressed out too. We will get through it together, but I understand why it's so difficult. It's also an important point here, and this is always a good practice, but especially now, to amplify the positive emotions, right? We need to help build up the resiliency of the team, and so there is never a better time to, if you see positive behavior, if you see people really going above and beyond, if you see pro-social behavior where team members are stepping up and helping each other, they're doing the right thing, you want to call that out. You want to be extraordinarily specific to help people understand that they are being seen, they're being noticed, they're being appreciated, and that especially in these hard times that you recognize that they're making an extra effort. It's also important to essentially keep your promises to them informationally. You can build trust with your team by being very clear, setting the boundaries of, okay, this is what I know, this is what I don't know or we don't know. But as soon as I get this information, I will keep you posted. I will let you know, and just letting them know you are on their side, that you are going to make sure that they have the information they need to move forward. There's a real information gap oftentimes in a crisis or a period of uncertainty, and that heightens people's anxiety. So the more you can build a positive feedback loop and just let them know, look, I am going to let you know as soon as I do. It's very reassuring for people that even if you don't have all the answers, if you have some of the answers and you're going to transmit them, it's helpful. So let's move on to the next point here. As we're coming to the denouement of this piece. Soon I'm going to be handing it back to my man Chris Moore. You can hear from him. But a big thing that we have heard a lot about, that's a big challenge for people and teams operating in this environment, is that this is a real problem, right? Obviously, there is a lot of new work. There's a lot of new things that need to be done. Some of them are, sort of logistical and technical, but there's, new projects, new developments, things that have to happen based on the unfolding, emerging situation. But in addition to that, that doesn't mean that the older stuff, the older goals or the older requirements have gone away. They haven't magically vanished somehow, right? They still have to be met. There's revenue that has to be brought in. There's goals that have to be hit. There's targets that are critically important. Well, what do you do about that? And so that's a real challenge to somehow balance those two things and to help your team figure out how do you do it. So there's a few things to keep in mind. Number one, in the short term, you do want to focus in on the crisis or on the emerging situation because it has to be addressed. No one has any idea. So you got to drill down in a few ways. There's emotionally, right? Sort of letting them vent or letting them get the emotions out and trying to manage their anxiety. There's technologically, so if there's challenges or issues, you help them get set up. You might sort of broker things with IT a little bit or provide a little extra help or tutorial to help them get up to speed so they can do what they need to do. And informationally, there is information that people really need to have to move forward about, well, here's the process, or here's how we're doing things now. And so making sure in the short term that we focus on that. But then we move to the longer term. And this is where you want to have organizational alignment and make sure you're talking really closely with your boss to understand, okay, what are the targets that absolutely have to be met? There's probably some things, honestly, that are going to fall by the wayside because we just can't do everything. But what is mission critical? What do we have to do so that everybody understands it? Your whole team can be aligned with it. And then finally, for these goals that are not necessarily like the number one goal, but are maybe more subsidiary goals, we want to be understanding because things are moving quickly, there may be changes that we want to make sure that we understand which things are least likely to change, right? So that we can focus on that. Nobody wants to waste work, nobody wants to waste effort, but we want to make sure that we're focusing on the things that stand the best chance of actually being worthwhile, that are going to remain goals for the organization. Let's move to the last slide of this part, which is talking about creating a leadership action plan for your team. This is actually one of the exercises that participants in the course are going to be doing. Um, it's interesting because in a time of crisis, in a time of uncertainty, a default sometimes is that sometimes people think, and I know this because the background that I came from, I used to work in communications. I was a spokesperson on a governor's race. I was a communications director on a presidential campaign. So I know that when it comes to this sort of breaking news type development, a lot of people assume that it's just the comms department responsibility. Oh, they'll handle that. But of course, if we think about it for a minute, we know communications is only a tiny piece. It's only a tip of the iceberg when it comes to responding to a big change and a big development. Yes, there's the question of how do you communicate about it, but also there's the question, hello, of what do you do about it? And that impacts everybody. And so creating a leadership action plan for your team, your department, or the people that you're responsible for, the people who are taking the course, so that they can do it for their people. This is really critically important because the truth is we can prepare for this. Many people don't, but you can prepare for it because oftentimes the most crises honestly are predictable. It's not predictable when. We don't know when, but the types of crises are predictable. We know, we've heard for 20 years that there's going to be some kind of a virus emerging somewhere, right? That's a type of crisis that is predictable. Is the stock market going to go down sometimes? Yes, we know that. Is a competitor going to introduce a groundbreaking new technology? Yes, inevitably at some point that's going to happen. If you're an oil company, is there going to be an oil spill? Unfortunately, but probably at some point. So the question is, we know what they are. We can plan. We just don't want to be caught flat-footed because we haven't thought about something that really people should have thought about. So it's important for us as leaders to understand overall what is the company plan, but then to come up with a plan for our team. And this can involve, just a lot of forethought that is going to be extraordinarily useful in the moment. I mean, it could be literally things like, okay, if certain people are sick, who's covering for them in what way? Or how do we preserve our operations? What do we need to be doing so that we can maintain the function that we need, the productivity that we need? So thinking through these questions can pay a tremendous dividend. It can be a tremendous competitive advantage because the truth is most people don't. They take the time and they sort of assume everything's going to be fine, and then when something surprising hits, I say surprising in air quotes, they are completely unprepared. If you and your people have taken even a small amount of time to invest in doing this, you are going to be so much further ahead of the game, and it's going to be a demonstrable business advantage. So I'm really excited about all this material. I'm excited to answer questions that you have too, but for right now, I'm going to hand things over to Chris Moore, who's going to tell you more, and he is the VP of product at ExecOnline. So Chris, let me hand things to you.
Great, thanks so much, Dorie. So again, my name's Chris Moore, member of the product team here at ExecOnline, and just wanted to share a little bit more about how ExecOnline specifically is prepared to support organizations in maintaining business continuity during this crisis, while also helping them to bridge the productivity and service gaps that they might be experiencing as we kind of get into this new normal. So first, I just wanted to quickly highlight our new Virtual Uncertainty Resource Hub. This is available via our public website. It's got a lot of useful resources for leaders. We're going to continue to add to it over the coming days and weeks. So there you'll be able to find additional webinars, articles, other resources that are going to feature experts, thought leaders sharing their insights into how to best navigate this difficult time. Second, I wanted to highlight how ExecOnline is tailoring our offerings in light of the most pressing needs that our clients have shared with us. We've been gathering a lot of feedback from our clients across the past few weeks, and we've pretty consistently heard 3 challenges rise to the top of their priority list. Number 1 is really around ensuring productivity remains high. Number 2 is around maintaining customer service levels. And number 3, keeping people connected and engaged. And all 3 of these are critical from a business continuity standpoint. But that being said, I just wanted to double click on that third point for a second. As Adam mentioned at the outset of this discussion, business leaders are really facing an unprecedented employee productivity and customer service challenge that's been happening for a long time, and it's been accelerated by COVID-19. As we all know, this is difficult and stressful for employees. They're adapting to working from home, being disconnected from their colleagues. They're dealing with children who are also home from school, worried about the health of, their family. Kind of the list of stresses goes on. But business leaders are also asking themselves, in the face of all of this, how do I keep my people feeling connected and engaged in their jobs? And it's against that backdrop that I wanted to highlight kind of the specific offerings that we feel are uniquely situated to support ExecOnline, support organizations in this moment. First, we're excited to be launching a brand new program that Dorie mentioned called Managing Uncertainty Virtually. We're also developing curated learning journeys, taking ExecOnline programs and adapting them for this moment. And number 3, individualized coaching. So I can share a little bit more about all 3 of these. Let me start with Managing Uncertainty Virtually. So as we've established, obviously, the managers in your organization are facing a pretty unprecedented challenge. Lots of organizations are just adapting to new ways of working, with more teams being forced to work virtually right now. But even if your teams were comfortable working virtually before the current crisis, pretty much every organization universally is grappling with this heightened level of uncertainty because of the continuing COVID-19 outbreak. And if you're thinking about how to support your organization with these challenges, you're likely to find a lot of content out there that's focused on things like, best practices for managing virtual teams. You're probably also likely to find some content that speaks to managing through times of uncertainty. But what this program does that we feel is unique and differentiated is it specifically addresses the intersection of that Venn diagram, how to manage through uncertainty while also managing a virtual team. If we take a closer look at the learning objectives for the program, what we really want to enable participants to do is number 1, be more agile. How can we help them be more attuned to a rapidly changing environment by understanding how to collect the right information and data in a more structured, reliable way, discerning fact from opinion, defining key signposts to monitor to validate or challenge those assumptions. Number 2, manage information flows more effectively, establish deliberate communication strategies. And number 3, forge more cohesive teams. The program itself is going to be 3 weeks. Participants are going to spend about 2 hours per week, which includes the lecture videos featuring Dorie Clark. Those are each about 3 to 5 minutes long, so very digestible and mobile friendly. There's also going to be live events in this first run. Those are also going to feature Dorie. And then throughout the course of the program, the participants are going to work on assignments that help them apply the skills they're learning. And that all leads into a final deliverable called the Leadership Action Plan. Just, kind of double clicking a little bit further here to wrap it up. This slide just provides a little bit more detail on the week-by-week journey for the participants. So they start in week 1 with guidance on how to seek out new information channels, establish new ways of communicating when the world is changing rapidly. Dorie's lectures are going to feature topics like monitoring signals, defining information channels, how to handle it when you don't know the answers, how to encourage your team to be more nimble. In the second week, we focus on practical guidance for managing virtual teams. So a lot of really practical mechanisms for helping the team cope with the pressures of responsiveness, how to handle difficult conversations virtually, things like of that nature. And then finally, in the third week, we focus on how leaders can help their teams to move forward productively and actually get some work done, even when priorities are rapidly evolving. So those key themes that the participants are going to hear about would include things like how to negotiate goals in the midst of change, balancing their workload of existing and new priorities, a real focus as well on how the manager can be a more effective advocate for their team and actually get mind share from senior leaders when everybody's kind of moving at 100 miles per hour. So that's the new Managing Uncertainty Virtually program in a nutshell. I'm going to turn it over for Q&A in just kind of 30 seconds. Final comment here on kind of existing programs that ExecOnline is adapting for this moment. We're calling these curated learning journeys. So we've carefully selected some programs from our portfolio of elite business school partner programs that we think are most critical in this moment. We're working with the faculty members to incorporate new content into those programs that focuses on how to navigate this crisis, and the events, the live events in those programs, focusing discussion on those areas as well. And then finally, that third solution that I mentioned, individualized coaching, what we're offering is an opportunity for leaders kind of at all levels of the organization to access our network of leadership coaches for kind of individualized and unlimited support and guidance during this really challenging time. So between March 25th and June 30th, participants can schedule as many sessions as they like for a fixed fee per participant. And this is, really designed so that we can offer, as many leaders as possible the opportunity to get some support dealing with the unique and kind of personal challenges that they're facing right now. So with that, there's a quick slide here on kind of key milestones and timelines to be aware of for the new program. In terms of next steps, I'd really encourage you to check out the resource hub that I mentioned. And to learn more about any of these offerings, please feel free, existing clients, reach out to your ExecOnline representative. New clients, here's some contact information here on the right side of the slide. And with that, I'd like to hand things back to Adam and Dorie for our Q&A session.
Great, thank you, Chris. And wow, Dorie, that was an incredible, amazing sort of overview of virtual uncertainty. I was super energized, listening to you go through that. A couple of things for the audience. If you have questions, put them in the chat. We will get to those questions momentarily. I'll give everyone a moment to do that. Before I go to those questions, though, just a question for you, Dorie, just about, you talked a little bit about the fact that, you've been living this. We came to you a couple weeks ago to talk about, virtual uncertainty. A lot has actually changed, in the last, 2 weeks. And just curious to hear, maybe a little bit more about the journey that you've been on over the last couple of weeks as you've been wrestling with these topics and really kind of getting your own perspectives in gear, while the whole world is changing around us.
Yeah, that's a great question, Adam, because I think in many ways it is a bit of a microcosm. I mean, ultimately, one of the things that we talk about in the course is how do you pivot quickly, and how do you maintain existing obligations and be able to move forward successfully even when everything is changing around you. And so, for instance, when we first were planning this, you guys reached out to me and said, "Oh, hey, can you do a webinar for us on Thursday at 11?" And I said, "No, sorry guys, I'm delivering a keynote speech in Florida that day. Can't do that. How about Friday? How about Wednesday?" And within like 36 hours, I was like, "So it looks like I can do Thursday at 11 because ain't going to Florida." And so I think many of you guys have probably experienced similar things. My entire April was going to be literally my busiest month of the year. I was going to be gone 3 out of 4 weeks. I had trips planned to Moscow, I was teaching in Moscow, to Cairo, to Stanton, Virginia. I'm on the I'm on the board of trustees at a university there. I was going to be speaking in Dallas. I was going to be speaking in Florida. And then I was going to TED, which has of course now been postponed, although I say in air quotes because, like, is it really going to happen in July? I don't even know. So yeah, so I'm grounded in New York for the next 2 months. So even just the scheduling of all this, we were scheduling back and forth about the filming of the course, and oh, it seems so fast because we've done one course together before, and we're moving pretty fast with that. That was like a 2 month period. This has been compressed in a 2 week period, and we moved up the filming twice because of concerns that we would basically be under house arrest and not able to get the filming done. Good news, everyone considering joining the course or having your people join the course. The course is filmed, course is done. There will be a course, but we had to be incredibly nimble in doing that. So it very much was a microcosm.
Yep, great. And yeah, need for a lot of agility right now. So I got a question here around targets. So someone's asking, so targets feel very fluid right now given everything that's happening. Can you say more about how managers should handle situations when they really just don't know all the answers? How do you handle that? Given all how those targets are moving.
Yeah, there's a few things to keep in mind here. So number one, to the extent possible, it's really important to be clear with your people up front that pretty much everything at this time period is provisional. So ultimately it's a balancing act, right? You have to say, look, we are serious about this goal. We really, we are aiming for this, asterisk. If the world implodes, we might need to do something else. You never want to be in a position where you're saying, oh, yes, definitely, because we don't know definitely. But you just, people kind of get it, right? They understand things are moving quickly. And you have to say, look, we have to move forward somehow. This is our best guess. We would never want to lead our people on a wild goose chase. That's not in anyone's interest. We legitimately want to do this. We think this is going to happen. If something crazy unfolds, it might need to change, but let's move forward toward this. That's number one. Number two, if it turns out that it does end up getting scrapped, that can be very demoralizing for a lot of people to feel like their work has been wasted, their effort has been wasted, or somehow that they're not appreciated or it's not being seen. And so it really pays as a manager to over-index on showing that it matters. Even if this has changed, you see what they have done. This is not in vain. This is not them just having done some stupid thing that nobody cares about. If you can really say, look, this is great. Maybe we can come back to it at a later point, or look, regardless of the future of this, we have had organizational learning from this. This has created valuable building blocks. We can take this and this moves us forward in some way. And then third, as a leader, and this is of course in communication with the people up and down the org chart, is really trying our best to pick targets that, even if it turns out that's not the thing, that in some way there's a kind of foundational base level that you're able to use what you have done or what you have learned in another way to be able to help some related initiative.
Yeah, thank you. That's terrific. And so we've got, I think, time for one more question. So another question that came in. So some people react to rapid change by standing still. So how do you encourage people to take the risk and get moving with limited information?
Yeah, it's very true. Whenever humans are in a crisis situation, we think of fight or flight as very literal, right? Like, we see the bear, but bears are emotional as well. We as humans do the same thing when we are faced with a psychological risk as a physical risk, and it's technically it's fight, it's flight, or freeze, which is a very common response. And so some people do freeze up. The most important thing here as a leader that you can do, it's two things. Number one is really conveying to people, making sure that you are telling the right stories so that they understand it, at least at an intellectual level, that the behavior we want want, what we are encouraging, what we are celebrating, you call out the positive examples, is we want people to still be moving forward, to take risks, to try things, to pilot, etc. So you want to call up stories from the past of times when your people have done that successfully. And also, number two, this is on you. You got to make it safe to make mistakes. It's very, very important that people don't want to do anything wrong if they feel like they're going to get their head handed to them as a result. So you got to make it so that whoever is first in screwing things up, that you don't punish them, that you don't freak out, and instead you say, you know what, I see where you were going with that, and I really like that effort, and here's what we learned from that. And when you do that, when people see that it's safe and that they will be highlighted rather than punished, it makes it a lot more likely that other people will say, all right, okay, I guess I'll give it a try.
Great, thank you, Dorie Clark, and thank you for this program and for all the great insights that you provided today. We are at time. We've got more questions in the chat box. What we're going to do is we're going to respond afterward to those different questions. So rest assured that we will get answers to you on those different questions. This session will be available on demand at our website. Crystal has the information in the chat box. We will be following up with you. And thank you again for attending the webinar today on what is a very difficult day and a challenging environment to take time out for a webinar. So thank you everybody, and we will see you soon in other webinars that we have coming. So thank you.
Thanks everyone for being here, and I hope to see you and or your people in the courses. Adam and Chris mentioned I'm going to be doing a couple of live sessions as well, so we'll be interacting as well. So hope to see you there.
Great, thank you.